Hello makers, I'm Katharine Harris with Stitchery, and this is your spot for all things sewing and DIY. So hit that subscribe button down below. This week I wanted to share with you something fun and exciting for fall and autumn and the Halloween season. So let's get to it. Now, for this week, I wanted to share with you something that I am very excited about. So I came across a challenge, and this one happens to be with Sonia Estop Designs. And what it was they were challenging you to create a costume out of their patterns, but there was one caveat. You had to have it where there's a everyday regular wear outfit, and then turning that into a costume and using sort of minimal accessories and other things that you're putting together on that costume with the ability that it still turns back into that regular everyday wear. So what better idea than something that I personally love, Disney bounding. So in terms of what I wanted to do, so my original vision was that I wanted to do Briar Rose from Sleeping Beauty. So with Disney bounding, if you're not familiar, you can't dress up like any of the princesses, because if you do, it's a bit of a security risk. Young children might come up to you if they're lost or scared, and you don't want to have someone who's not employed at the park having those interactions. So you have to get a bit creative on how you put everything together and how you portray those characters. So I decided to go with Briar Rose, which is a bit more of a casual look. And then I decided to go and shop the Sonia Estop Designs website to see what patterns I thought would really work here. So I decided to start with the Hazel skirt. So if you're wondering how I made that skirt, I will link the video down below for you where you can check out exactly how I made that skirt, including some of the modifications that I did make to it. Spoiler alert, I added pockets. Now with this, I wanted to make sure that I was creating an everyday look that didn't look too costumey. Now, if you've been a longtime subscriber, you will know that I love all things vintage. So of course, I had to play up the lines and the buttons on this skirt to really play into that late 1940s, early 1950s vibe that this skirt was given by choosing a nice wool suiting fabric to use. Now the wool suiting fabric I had was a black and white herringbone. So I wanted to ensure that it was a little bit more tan, taupey, brown color to really match Briar Rose in the movie there. Now you see a couple of different photos floating around of Aurora and Briar Rose. And sometimes they look a little bit more taupey, sometimes they even look a little bit more gray and blue. So I thought that by doing the black and white, which gives an overall gray tone, was okay, but I really wanted to pull in a bit more of those colors. So I decided to dye this fabric, and I used the RIT synthetic dye, not realizing that I had wool and it didn't dye quite as well. I should have used something that was geared more towards like the natural fibers. That being said, it still dyed it enough that I was getting the color that I was happy with. Wasn't perfect, but I think it was okay. So from there, I decided to stitch up the skirt. So that is piece one in our costume. The second part that I wanted to do is recreate that blouse. Now, ideally I would have done this in a woven, and I probably would have had a nice shirt collar underneath. That being said, Sonia Estop Designs has a few woven patterns, but the vast majority are knits. And I had previously made the Katharine dress. I will also link that video down below so you could see how I made that. And I noticed that the bodice fit very well. And when I was looking at that pattern, which happened to be on the shelf in my sewing room, I started to look at the bishop sleeve option. And I was like, you know what? Those sleeves look oddly similar to Briar Rose's sleeve. Yes, it is a knit shirt, but that just makes it even more comfortable than a woven. So I decided to alter that pattern just slightly. So you can see in my original Katharine dress, the top goes down, the neckline goes down quite a bit lower than what I have here. So the first step I decided to do was alter that neckline. So let's get into that. So the blouse, the Katharine dress hacks. So first we're going to work on the bodice. The back, totally fine. The front, we have to change that neckline. So what we are going to do here is we are going to raise it. So I am just taking some scrap piece of paper here, and then I am going to tape that down. And then I am just measuring where I would like it to start. So I did mine 3 1/4 inches from the shoulder seam here to get the desired length that I wanted. So I've just made a little mark. I'll make it a little bit darker for you here. And then I'm taking the front and I'm just extending it, going the exact same direction as that center front is. So next we need to mark out that curve point. And so I am just using my French curve here, and I'm just kind of moving it around just slightly so that I kind of get that curve that I want. And next I am going to take that, and now I am going to bring it up a little bit more towards that shoulder seam here, because we've got the center point where we want, but we don't want it to come out like a boat neck. We want it to still be a little bit tighter. So I'm just freehanding that, and then I am going to use my scissors and just cut that out so that we have our new pattern piece. And you can see that we have drastically raised that neckline on that piece here. And I'm just going to reduce that shoulder seam just slightly here. So next we have the neckband piece. So you should be using a flexible ruler, but I didn't have one handy. It was in the other room. So I am just walking my ruler along here, and I am marking out how long that is. So we've got 4 inches on the one side, and then I am going to walk my ruler along the new neckline that we have drawn. And right in here, I have just calculated here, and we have 6 inches on that side. So next we're going to go 4 plus 6 equals 10, and then we're going to take 90% of that because we want our neckband to stretch. So anywhere between 80 and 90% is a good stretch percentage. The existing neckband was at 90%, so I decided to keep the exact same here. Next, I am using the exact same width for our neckband, and I am just redrawing this pattern piece so it is a little bit longer here. And then I am just going to label this for our neckband, and don't forget to put in the fold line here. And I'm just going to mention that this is for the high neck version of my pattern, just so I know when I come back to it at a later date. Now, once that neckline was altered, another thing that I needed to do was adjust the waist of the actual shirt to make it a shirt length as opposed to just a bodice. So I wanted to show you how I changed it from being a dress bodice to a shirt length that is adequate enough to be able to tuck into a skirt. So for this, I'm just taping the bodice piece of the dress onto another piece of paper here. And then I'm going in and I am going to lengthen this. So I am just marking out a generous amount to lengthen this here. And then I'm just connecting that same line. If you want something that isn't necessarily as tight, what I would suggest doing is straightening that line from the sleeve so that you don't have it as tight to the body. But I wanted a shirt that was a bit more tight to the body because I will be tucking it in to my skirt, similar to how you'd wear a bodysuit. Now, this is significantly longer than you need. I actually ended up reducing this by about 3¼ inches. So just so you know, you don't have to do that extra 9 inches. I did this because I didn't want to do up a muslin, and then it was just easy to take that away. And so you want to do the exact same increase and decrease on the front as you do the back. And now I just want to show you that I am removing about 3 inches from the bottom here to get the right length on this, so you can modify your shirt accordingly. And then I just folded it under about 3/4 inch, and I am just doing this by eye. It's not a very hard measurement there. That being said, if you want to use a seam gauge, by all means use a seam gauge to get it nice and precise. And then I'm going in with my cover stitch, and I am just stitching all the way around, and it's nice and stretchy and should look just like this when you are all completed. And now was onto the sleeves. Now the original bishop sleeves in this pattern go all the way down to your wrist length. And the ones that Briar Rose uses are a 3/4 length. So I knew I needed to shorten that. And then just looking at the cuffs in the line drawings, as well as some of the photos, the cuffs are a bit wide for what Briar Rose has. So I decided to modify it slightly by reducing the size of the cuffs. And I wanted to walk you through how I did that. So for the sleeves here, we are going to mark 3.5 inches above as well as 3.5 inches below the lengthen or shorten line. Now, ideally, you would cut on that line. That being said, I wanted to maintain this pattern piece so that I could just take it apart later so that I had the same size pattern piece for a full length sleeve and I wouldn't have to create a new one. So I am just marking this and I will just be folding it. Now this top line is just something that we're using as a guide. Really the more important line is going to be this bottom line. So we're actually going to fold the lengthen or shorten line right to that bottom line for that 3.5 inches. That top line you didn't even need to do, but I decided to do it because I wasn't sure which way I was going to fold the paper when I had started. So I'm just taping it down loosely, and now we have the 3/4 length sleeve. Next up, we need to alter the wrist cuffs. So for the wrist cuff here, I am just going to mark this out here. And really, when I had originally started, I was thinking it would be the same length around, but this is down on the wrist. So this is me realizing it now. We are doing a 3/4 length, so we want to make sure that we have enough room going around where that 3/4 length sleeve is going to be. So this one is 6 inches, and this one is definitely more than 6 inches. We are getting closer to that 9 inches, 8.5 inches there. So we need to make the adjustment for that. Now, because it is cut on the fold here, I am going to do 4¼ inches wide. So that's how long it's going to be because it will be cut on the fold. And then I want to half how big the width of that cuff is. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to figure out what half of this is. Now do bear in mind that when you are creating these cuffs, they are folded in half again. So it is going to be actually half of that width, which is exactly the size that I wanted. So this is the new cuff for the 3/4 length sleeve. And don't forget to put where you have the fold on your paper. So this is going to be what the width is, and just fold it here. And then of course you have your seam allowance going along the top there. So I wanted to quickly show you how to put that together because it isn't in my original Katharine tutorial because I did the flutter sleeves. You're just going to stitch that tube together, and then with wrong sides together, you are going to clip it in place, and I am just marking it in halves. Now you could mark quarters if you wanted to, but it's a small piece, halves do well. Then I have done 2 rows of gathering stitches along the sleeves, and I am just going to mark that center point so that I know where it is, and I'm going to pull those gathering stitches in to really go and gather those nice bishop sleeves. So I am just pulling those in and distributing those ruffles nice and even, and then I am going to line up the half point and both of those seams, and then distribute those ruffles in between there, making sure that I've got everything all neatly placed. And I'm just going in with those clips just to make sure nothing moves around. It's a lot of clips, but it's worth it. And then I'm going to stitch and serge that in place, and the cuffs are all done. And the next step would then be for us to work on that hem, which I talked about in an earlier step. Here I am just showing you that I am going to be cutting off a portion of that hem, which I have already done. So now that we have the pattern all altered and stitched up, we now have our second piece. So that is 2 patterns from Sonia Estop Designs that gives an everyday look. And now this is the fun part where I get to turn that look into Briar Rose in a Disney bounding sense, as well as fun for Halloween for people up here in Canada. We can't really travel with COVID, so there is no Disneyland in my future. Well, at least not anytime soon. So I thought that it would be great to dress up like this for Halloween as well. So the first thing that I knew I needed to have was this collar piece. So it wasn't going to look quite right in a knit to have that collar. And the collar that she has on her shirt, instead of it being a cream color like what my shirt is, it was actually a stark white, which is perfect. So I drafted a detachable collar pattern, and I will have it linked down below. Head on over to my website. You just need to sign up to our newsletter and you can grab that pattern for free so you can stitch it up as well. And that collar really created that top portion. Making the collar. So for this, we are going to use a small scrap of fabric here. I am just using some white broadcloth here. I have placed interfacing on the under collar here, and I'm using a fusible woven interfacing in a medium weight because I do want to have a nice weight to this collar. And then I am just going to iron out the other piece, which is our top collar here. So next, with right sides together, we are going to pin this collar together, and we're going to pin it along the 2 sides of the collar point as well as the exterior side here. So we're just going to pin all the way around, making sure that they match up perfectly. So we're going to stitch going all the way around. When you get to the corners, you're going to come in and then you're going to take a step diagonally and then you're going to stitch. That gets you perfect collar points every single time. Now we are going to grade the seam allowances. So we are actually going to trim away the side that has the interfacing, and we're going to grade that in half. So we are going to just pull this in. If you have duck-billed scissors, those come in so handy for these grading of the seam allowances, but we just want to reduce some of that bulk along the edge here. And once we have that in place, I am just trimming the corners here so that we can get a nice good point. And then I am going to go in and I am going to notch. So whenever we have a curve that is a convex curve, you are going to cut out notches. Concave curves, you are going to clip little snips. So it's just the way that the curves lie to be able to help reduce puckering. Next, we are not going to fully turn it out, but we are going to place the seams so that they are going towards the side with the interfacing, so the under collar. And then we are going to understitch that so that it turns quite nicely. Use your point turner to really poke out those corners and get them nice and crisp and sharp. And once you have that, I am working on the side that we have understitched here. And I am just rolling this out and giving it a nice good press. And when you understitch your collar, the pressing is a dream and you never have anything kind of slipping out of place. It's wonderful. Now the next step, we are going to place it again right sides together because we need to close in this back detail because this is just a collar that just floats on top. So with right sides together, I am going to pin the sides here. So we're just going to match these up and with the understitching as best as we can along those corners here. Now, the next step that we need to do is we need to mark an opening. So I am marking an opening that is approximately 2 inches wide. That way we can turn out our collar. If you have troubles turning things out, you may want to make it 3 inches wide just to give you a little extra room. Now I have notched the inside, and now we can go in and we can start to pull that collar out. I like to grab the one side between my 2 fingers and then just pull it out and then work it out with the point turner and do the same thing on the other side. And then really work those points out, make sure they're nice and crisp. And then we're going to iron it again because, well, look at how crinkly that got. So I am going to use a decent amount of steam to really press this in place and then fold under that opening because we will need to stitch that closed later. So for that opening, you can either stitch it with a ladder stitch or you can use a sewing machine. Now, in order for us to close it, I am going to be using a hook and eye closure. So from this side here, we are going to have the hook going this way and the other side going on this side, and I've just hand stitched that on, and it hooks in quite nicely and it can go right over your neck just like so, and you can wear it with a ton of different outfits as well. And then, of course, we needed to have the signature corset piece. Now, there was no patterns on Sonia Estop Designs that was even remotely similar to what a corset might be. So I decided to create a corset, and I used the pattern from Red Threaded in the Victorian corset. Yes, I know this is not historically accurate, but that is not what we are going for. We are going for a fun Disney bounding outfit with pieces that I can still wear in my everyday wardrobe. So I decided to alter this. So I have a full tutorial on how I made that corset as well as the alterations I did to give it that deeper V. Now I know that Briar Rose has an even deeper V than the corset that I drafted, but the reason why I drafted it in this way is because I wanted to be able to use this corset in other instances. And if I were to give that super deep V and permanently attach those ribbons, then I wouldn't be able to use it in other instances. So I just wanted to give a more subtle nod to that. So head on over and watch how I created that. I also wanted to show you really quickly here how I attached those ribbons because I knew I wanted them to be detachable. So let's get to that. Now, modifying the corset for Briar Rose. So with this, I am using some narrow ribbon that I had in my stash, and I really want this to be detachable, so I didn't want to stitch it directly onto the corset, not to mention it would then defeat the functionality of that busk and me being able to get my corset on with great ease. So with this, I am just measuring out these instances. Do be sure to measure them out as well when you're wearing the corset, because of course you do have volume over the bust. So I'm actually going to use these snap fasteners to attach this to the corset, and it enables me to change up that function. So I am doing the male side on the ribbon and the female side on my corset, and I've just hand stitched that on. All I did was fold my ribbon over, and then I just knotted my double layer of thread. Do be sure to wax your thread just because it creates a stronger thread and it doesn't tangle as easily when you are hand stitching. And then I'm just going through my snap fastener a couple of times before I knot off and attaching that snap fastener to the ribbon here, and then just attaching it on the one side just like so right here. And then you've got the one side created. Oh, I just need to make sure I've got the fasteners going in the right way, right like so. So we have one side created. Now I need to create that crisscross. Now it's going to be tight because it doesn't plunge as deeply as Briar Rose's, but I did that on purpose. So next I'm just folding over the one edge of the ribbon, and I am determining what angle I want that ribbon to go in. And then I am just going to attach that by hand to the existing snap that is along the top. And once I have that all stitched in place, the second thing to do would be to attach the other side at the same angle and get that off. So then we are starting to get that crisscross, and then you want that second side done as well. So you can see that I've got the first side and the second side, and then I have just attached snaps on the very ends of that ribbon to attach to those bottom snaps on the corset here. And we have the Briar Rose lacing in the front. And then of course it was the accessories. So Briar Rose has a pair of black ballet flats, and I just happened to find some in the back of my closet that I thought would work perfectly. A nice black headband would go quite nicely with that. And then of course there's the matter of the fact that she is blonde and she was, gifted by the fairies this beautiful blonde golden hair. Well, not about to dye my hair anytime soon, so I decided to get a wig and style that up. So I have a tutorial on how I dyed and customized my 613 wig. So if you are interested in how I did that, do head on over and check out that video as well. But right here, I wanted to show you really quickly how I went ahead and styled this wig for Aurora. Now, the first thing that you're going to want to need is a clip-in bang piece. Now, this tutorial also works quite well for your regular hair as well, especially if you don't want to cut yourself any bangs. Now, let's get to it. So styling Briar Rose's hair. This is the fun part. So I've already dyed this to match my wig, and head on over to that wig tutorial video where I talk about exactly what dyes I used to transform that wig. I am just using my curling iron here, and it is pretty much the only curling iron that I find really works quite well on my hair. I don't tend to use a lot of heat on my hair, and this goes in, and it's about 1.25 inches at the top, and then it really tapers down more narrow going to the bottom. And I'm trying to use the larger section here. I want to try to get some volume and lift. Now I have pinned this to my wig form. If you're doing it on yourself, pin it to yourself when you're curling these. And then, but don't let the curl drop. Roll it back up and use a clip to really hold it in that barrel style. And make sure that it cools in that way, because that is how we're going to get that curled bang that Aurora or Briar Rose has. And I like to do it in 3 sections, the 2 sides as well as the front on the main bangs. And then these clip-in bangs have a longer section along the sides that will kind of blend into the hair. And actually Briar Rose does have a nice little side piece that kind of curls. So I think that works quite nicely with that. So after those curls have cooled, I like to take it down, and because this is a clip-in bang for a wig, I just keep the curls barreled up like this, and then I like to take in a foam roller, which is what I usually use for some of my heatless curls, and I just roll that up, and I held it there for a couple of days until I needed to use my wig. Now, when you're ready to install it on either your own hair or your wig, it's got a couple of little clips here. I like to do the front, and then I do back closer to the crown, and then just start to adjust it. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're really going to fan dangle the front of the bangs, make sure it's not split down the sides or the middle, and just kind of comb it into the rest of the hair. Now here I am really starting to form that barrel in the center, and what I am going to do here is I'm going to put in a couple of bobby pins. So I'm putting one in on one side and then one in on the other side, crossing them in the middle, and that is what is going to hold that curl in the front for that bang. And then I'm just going to puff it out so that it looks a little bit more like the bangs and it's nice and full. And then I am just going to adjust it slightly along the sides. If this is your real hair, you could just tease up the back to hide that comb. But because this is going to be Briar Rose, she needs a headband. We can just cover that with our headband, no teasing involved. And then just finesse the front curls that you have on your existing hair. And you are done and ready to rock it. And now that we have the wig all styled exactly as we like it, I will let you see how we can go from this to this Briar Rose. This was a ton of fun to make and put together. Plus, who doesn't love dressing up every now and again? Until next time, makers, have a happy Halloween, and let's get your sewspiration on.